Better Call Saul cinematographer Marshall Adams. Marshall, thank you so much for doing this. Just broadly, I want what was you've been with Better Call Saul since I think season 3. What was your approach, or how did your approach, I guess, evolve going into this final season from when you joined the show?
Well, we had a lot of challenges. I mean, obviously with the COVID challenges. I mean, we did this a year and a half ago almost when we wrapped. Um, but they just upped the show. I mean, I alternated with my operator moved up, so Paul Donahue shot the other all even episodes. But we really had challenges. They doubled the number of days we had per episode. They, did crazy things like inside the oil tanker and, all kinds of crazy stuff. So it was exciting. It was a completely different approach, but, we really wanted to kind of up the game for the final season.
Yeah, I think you did. I want to talk a lot about the finale, obviously, and it's just incredible. You mentioned the closed quarters. I mean, even the opening of the finale, we have Gene, I guess at that point in the dumpster. I just found that shot so incredible, just even starting there. And I was like, how are they even doing this? I guess can you talk a little about that and kind of I guess, yeah, starting there at the start of that, that early stages of the finale there, and that shot specifically, I thought was so cool and not something I'd seen before where you're in the dumpster with him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it actually starts when we're at his apartment and we pan over from the police and see him climbing out the window, and we start the chase with him through the helicopter and the train tunnel that's here in Albuquerque. So we I mean, that actually was on stage, if you can believe it. That they built that dumpster actually, I think, for season 2. And they've had it floating around ever since. But so we were able to kind of control everything for that particular sequence. But the alleyway, I mean, all the snow that they added, you can imagine the logistics were just enormous. Not to mention going into a maximum security prison. So there's always that.
So you end there in the prison, obviously, and you have the final kind of the 2 last scenes with Bob and Ray, obviously, and when they were in the jail, right, in that prison scene, it's just absolutely gorgeous in the way you're kind of lighting it, and I just found that whole thing just unbelievable looking, and there's obviously so much there between those 2 characters because that's coming back together after all this time. But I guess can you talk about how you kind of approached that last scene of them together inside the jail before we see them obviously apart outside, but I especially the lighting and kind of, yeah, just it looks so so film noir and kind of really gorgeous. I just was I just would love to hear you kind of how you approach that whole sequence there with them.
Well, I had the good fortune, they established the black and white for any of the Gene time period stuff from the very beginning. So which meant we ended up shooting the last 4 episodes of the season pretty much all in black and white. But that was a big one because there's smoking has been a reoccurring thing that actually started with Arthur Albert, I think in season 1, where they're smoking down in the parking garage. It had a particular kind of style of light that I wanted to kind of come back to and revisit it. And so the set kind of lent itself. I worked with Denise Pizzini, our production designer, and placement of the windows and kind of how that set was going to kind of come together, so that I could emulate that lighting style again, kind of revisit it, but in black and white, and pay homage to the whole thing from the beginning.
And then how about just the performances too? Because there's so much there that's obviously that they're not saying, and I guess no kidding that Bob and Ray are incredible actors, but I guess how are how did you work with how do you work with them there, and especially at the end, obviously this is the end of the series, but I guess are you still constantly surprised by what they're able to do with those characters, even at the end there and those last sequences together, I guess? Yeah.
All the time. Those 2, especially together, are just so good. I mean, just their chemistry has really developed over the time, and to watch them work off of each other. They actually live in the same house when they're here in Albuquerque, and they rehearse on the weekends. I mean, they're really deeply invested. So there's that, and that actually was the last scene that we did. And that was the one that sent us home forever. So it was kind of cool to be able to do that, you know, as the last thing.
Wow, that's amazing. What was it like when they called cut there? I mean, it had to be pretty emotional sequence there, I guess.
It was pretty emotional. As you can imagine, they both wanted to thank the crew, and you know that turned into half an hour of just talking about how great, you know, it was, what an experience it was for all of us, and how spoiled we feel, you know, having had this experience, and how great it was. You know, it kind of ruined us for the rest of the rest of the business in some ways. But anyway.
I want to ask you about like earlier in the episode. There's two scenes, obviously, like where Saul Jimmy is like negotiating with the police, like for his plea deal, right? And he's like in full Saul mode in that sequence. And then later in the courtroom, when he's standing up in front of the judge, he starts in Saul mode and like becomes Jimmy again, right? Like, and I guess I was wondering, like watching, I was like, did you view them differently, and how did you shoot, you know, Bob as Saul versus Bob as Jimmy? If was that something that you thought about, like how when he's in, like when he's affecting the persona, basically, did you shoot him differently or think about it differently?
We did. We made a conscious effort actually to, you know, that scene was, I don't know, whatever it was, 15 pages long. I mean, it was, we shot it over, I think, 3 days, because we were actually in a real courthouse in Albuquerque, that one that we'd never been in before. So it was a little touchy, and, you know, with all the COVID restrictions, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it was, we made a conscious effort to kind of be a little bit lower and wider on Saul, kind of how we had been throughout the series. And as Jimmy kind of took over, we went a lot longer and kind of raised the camera and made it kind of more personal. So yeah, there was definitely a conscious effort to kind of separate the two, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because it's like, I mean, it's like almost imperceptible, right, for the viewer, but you do feel like, like even watching, you feel like something is different here, like we're approaching it differently, and it's not just the performance. I think it's the whole thing. It's really, really cool. That the courtroom scene, you have two great shots I wanted to ask you about. You have Kim in the back, obviously, and like there's one quick shot of her like foot, like just kind of like nervously shaking, and I just thought that was so great. And I'm assuming that was like in the script, but can you talk, like, or was that something that you kind of like were like, oh, we could catch this, I guess, like, and then how do you think about like that for her character? Yeah.
That was actually Peter's idea from the beginning. It was on his shot list right from the beginning. You know, he wrote and directed. You know, we have the good fortune of having a lot of the writers actually direct their episodes, so which makes a big difference. I mean, they know these beats inside and out, and the storytelling that they want to tell. Especially since, you know, that final episode was Peter Gould, our showrunner. So, you know, anything he wanted to do, he could do, obviously. But yeah, no, and you know, that courtroom lent itself to some really, really fun stuff. You know, one of the shots that I remember that we found was that the one with a kind of looks like a scope cross in front of her. That was actually the railing that was in that courtroom, and we just discovered that. You know, it was such a kind of a callback to what everybody was assuming, you know, that she wasn't going to survive the show. Everybody was talking about, you know, how could we possibly kill Kim, you know? So anyway, it was nice to kind of pay homage to that, but also kind of laugh about it, you know.
That's really cool. You also have, there's a great job of the exit sign, I think, right? Like at one point, like from shooting from behind that, which I just loved. I thought that was like so cool. And it's such a great perspective shift, obviously, because we've been so like close on Jimmy and Saul in that sequence. So like to pop it back out, I thought was like really cool as well.
Yeah, again, you know, that was Peter. That was actually, he'd written it in. That was a callback to Chuck too, you know, back in Chuck's demise was all in a courtroom, and in you know, that great beat where we go back and hold that exit sign, and he, you know, he starts to freak out about the electricity. So yeah, no, I mean, you know, we have such gifted writers, and you know, it makes it so much easier when you have it on the page, that it just makes it so much fun, especially with people like Vince and Peter, who really let everybody bring their best game, you know, do their bring their ideas and try things out, take risks, and I never really worry that much about it. So
No, yeah, it's an incredible show, obviously, and a testament because of how beloved it is. I guess like you've been a part of like the Breaking Bad like universe or whatever so many years now, like, and you've done so much incredible work. Like, what for you it makes like a great shot of this like world, right? Like that you guys have created. Like what makes up a great shot here, I guess, for this?
boy, it's, you know, they're all so different with different approaches. You know, I always come back to episode 3 of this last season with with the oil tanker. You know, I had, you know, they had to build that tank special, the interior of it special for us on stage, so that we could get a crane in that could go all the way across with a periscope lens on right at the surface of the oil. You know, that was a great sequence that I'll always remember. But you know, just sometimes, you know, you just got to know to get out of your own way. You know, it's when Ray and Bob are doing their thing, and you know, we're talking about shots that could be interesting or more exciting. It always has to come back to the storytelling, and so that's you know, sometimes you got to go. Let's let them play out the scene and get out of our own way and not try to overdo it too much. So that's also a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. Marshall Adams, Better Call Saul, cinematographer. Thank you so much for doing this.
You betcha. Nice meeting you. Thank you.